I just want to welcome everybody. This is the third mentor circle in our May series. And the topic for the month of May has been mental health and wellness. And earlier in May, the first week of May, it was Mental Health Week here in Ontario and Canada. And so I've been thinking a lot about what's been happening in the world right now with the pandemic, and in the best of times, we often lead chaotic lives, and we're running around from one thing to the next in this busyness. And, you know, over the last several years, mental health and illness has been hugely impacted, and, you know, now we're in this time. And so I thought this would be a really good topic to have our mentor circles on this month. So thank you for joining us, and feel free to put in questions as we go. This is meant to be interactive sessions. So what are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to talk about what stress is. You know, Lisa's going to lead us through that. What is stress? How it relates to, you know, what is the impact potentially on stress and performance? How is it impacting the workplace potentially? And then she's going to walk us through some ways to reduce stress. And I think a lot of us could use, you know, some practical guidance and some tips on stress reduction through this time, but at any time where we feel we're overwhelmed or there is just way too much going on. So that's the topic for today. And we do allow for Q&A throughout. We'll stop from time to time to see if there's any questions. And then we'll keep some time at the end as well. So one of the things I've been doing as I have created this series starting in April, I'm a quote person, and I love, you know, being inspired by quotes, but also, you know, just thinking about it. Sometimes people can say it just the way you want to. And, you know, over the years, I've had some stress issues as well, and some anxiety that I've had to manage through, and realizing that I do have a bit more control in how I react to things. I've done a lot of work, but I think it's really important to hopefully find that guidance that you need, whether it's a counselor, whether it's just a friend, whether it's a mentor or a coach that can help you, you know, tap into that, our own power of being able to manage through and recognize those emotions and the stress, and try to alleviate some of that. Meditation has been a huge part of that. So I think, you know, if you don't know Wayne Dyer's work, he does a lot of work in this space, meditation, emotional intelligence, a lot of other stress relief guidance. So you could check him out. And, you know, I am going to introduce and hand it over to Lisa in a few minutes. I am so happy that Lisa is joining us today. And just to give you a little bit of background, Lisa and I met through an organization called SheEO. And SheEO is a fantastic organization that supports women entrepreneurs. And they tackle the world's to-do list. Fabulous. So we met through that, and I had started a informal mentor circle for some of the activators, which were women supporting the business ventures. And so we met through that, and we didn't always have her on our mentor circles, but we certainly met through that. And I've just loved watching her journey and her progress to now becoming a certified neurotransformational coach. I just love the area of neuroscience and learning about that. She's a leadership coach. She has a mastermind. She does workshops and one-on-one work. And she's had an amazing history, not only as a successful vice president in corporate, she's also been a successful business owner and actually grew a business to multi-millions. So she's seen a lot over over the years. And so welcome, Lisa. I'm so happy to have you. And then before I stop the share and hand it over to you, I love, and I saw that Hilda was on, and she's like me, we love stats. And so, you know, it's amazing to me that, you know, how much people are feeling this constant stress since the pandemic. And, you know, there are twice as many Canadians that are feeling it now than they were pre-pandemic. There's an increase of feeling stress regularly. And so I'm glad we're talking about this, and we're going to have some opportunity to share experiences. But what I thought was really interesting, and I do share the slides afterward, was this next slide, which shows 20 years ago. And 63% of Canadians were feeling at least the same or more stress in their lives as compared to 5 years ago. So it's not going away. You know, stress, one of the greatest causes was work job. And that's one of the things I'm trying to help organizations, you know, create healthier workplaces. So I thought that was really interesting to kind of compare, like, is it getting better or not? And what is this time going to do now? And how can we help people manage through it? So thought I'd share that with you. You know, really, what can we do for each other and for ourselves to help manage through that? So I'm going to pass it over to Lisa. I'm just going to stop my share. And as I said, feel free to, you know, jump in when you want to. I'm just going to get her presentation up, so bear with me. My tech is always the the challenge I have. I had it up here somewhere. Just give me a second. I think it's right here, hopefully. And it's not the best one. I had a full screen one, but can everybody see that or not?
It's not being shared yet, Helen.
Okay, let me just share again. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't need to stop share. Never fails. Can I get back into the Zoom room? Here we go. One more second. Share screen again. Silly me. Okay, there's the desktop. And there we go. Okay, can everybody see that now?
Yep.
Okay.
It's not on full screen, but.
Yeah, I don't know. I think because I PDF'd it, I apologize, but we'll work with that so we don't take up any more time. And okay, so
firstly, thank you so much for having me. This is definitely a topic that I deal with regularly with clients in terms of just managing stress of busy life in general. I have seen a huge increase in the amount of stress just from clients trying to manage all of it. And so the idea today is to give you a little bit of the brain science, kind of explaining the pandemic, COVID-19, all of the stuff that has been happening with a perspective of what's actually happening in our brain. How does our brain feel about everything that's going on? And hopefully give you a little bit of an understanding as to why it is that you might be feeling some of the things that either you're feeling or people around you are feeling. So I'm not at all surprised with some of those stats that you put up, Helen, and certainly in my circles of coaches, a lot of people are talking about what will come out of this time from a mental health and overall well-being perspective. And so we'll get a little bit into some of the brain science and some of the ways that we can start to both help ourselves and help those around us start to manage that stress. And all of the tools that I'm sharing are based on research in terms of their effectiveness based on the neuroscience behind them. So I do have a request, which is that we do not make this a Lisa show. I want you guys to participate, please. Ask questions. The idea here, one of the things I'll talk about is the fact that connection is so important. And that's been restricted a bit for us. And so this is an opportunity for us to connect, to share, and to really learn from each other. Okay, so do I have like a yes, we'll all kind of ask questions and share, and perfect, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we start, Helen, with just a very simple definition of stress, which, let me just change this so that I can see it on my screen. Yeah.
And I have the full screen now.
Perfect. Okay, so according to the American Psychology Association, stress is the pattern of responses an organism makes to stimulus events that disturb its equilibrium and tax or exceeds its ability to cope. So I'm going to say that one more time. Stress is a pattern of responses an organism makes to stimulus events that disturb its equilibrium and tax or exceeds its ability to cope. What I have found with many of my clients is their equilibrium is off. Their sense, both internally and externally, of some kind of balance, whatever that happened to be pre-pandemic, was totally turned upside down once we started to get into the situation. And much of what happened, because it happened so quickly, really exceeded our ability to cope in the moment with what was coming up. And so I kind of like this, this definition, because it gives us two places to look, which is one, where am I in terms of a sense of equilibrium in my life, equilibrium internally within my body and externally with what's going on. And then secondly, how am I doing in terms of my ability to cope? And this is not the time to kind of try to put rose-colored glasses on, but certainly a time to really be truthful with ourselves and look at those areas where our ability to cope are being stretched. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's go on to the next one. And what I wanted to talk about as it pertains to stress and performance is the fact that stress gets a bit of a bad rap. We always talk about stress from its negative perspective. Helen, do you mind going to the next slide? And in fact, our brain, that part of our brain that allows us to set goals, analyze, make decisions, it actually requires a certain amount of stress. And that part of the brain actually sits right behind your forehead. So it's called the prefrontal cortex. It's right behind your forehead. And it requires a certain level of dopamine and norepinephrine, which is adrenaline in the brain, in order to operate. So when we are deficient in those chemicals in our brain, we have the same reaction as when we have too much of these chemicals in our brain. So what's interesting about this is they call this part of the brain the Goldilocks of the brain. And it's because we don't do well with too little, we don't do well with too much. We're always in search of the just right amount of balance of these chemicals. And so too little and too much looks like this. Oh, you know what? That is, goodness gracious, just right should be on the top one and too little, too much should be on the bottom. So disregard what I've said that. It's the opposite. I must have been in too much or too little when I put the slide together.
Might have been foggy thinking.
I wasn't, you know what it was. I had my kids around me running around. So it's
okay. I completely forgot to change the title of emotional intelligence is related, and I forgot to introduce who I am and why I'm here. I'll do that later.
We're all doing the best we can, right? So, okay, so too little, listen to me and forget what the slide says. Too little and too much feels like this. You're experiencing foggy thinking. You have poor impulse control. You have poor decision making. It might even feel harder to make decisions that were easier pre-pandemic. You're experiencing poor memory. You can't remember things the way you did before. There's a black and white thinking, like you kind of just, you don't see the gray zones. You kind of, it's either great or it's horrible. And there's a lack of empathy that happens in this space of too little or too much, okay? When we're in just right, we have the ability to set goals and set a direction that's aligned with those goals. We can actually delay gratification and potentially, in my case, not run to the cupboard for some chocolate when I'm feeling too much or too little. Making and retrieving memories are much easier. You remember the things and you can retrieve those memories without much effort. Your words come to you no problem. You can reflect back on things that have happened. Your decision making is more fluid. It feels easier. You're making decisions almost in a way that flows. You can actually put yourself in the shoes of others. You can empathize with them. You can understand where they're coming from. And there's an ability to embrace, understand abstract concepts. So your ability to analyze and evaluate and clearly look at an issue and see all sides of it is much easier when you're in just right. So the question here is, what have you been experiencing over the last few weeks? Have you been in too little? Have you been in too much? Have you had moments of just right? Have you been primarily in just right? What have you guys been experiencing over the last few weeks?
I'll go first, and then maybe others might want to pipe in. I have probably, and it's interesting because I had a chat with Hilda last week about, we were doing a topic on mental health as well, and I think I felt everything. Since March, I came back from my March break from vacation. I have just been, you know, I mean, hey, poor memory was just today. Like sometimes I can't even focus on what I'm doing. And then other times, you know, I really feel like if I do take that space for myself and, you know, have my meditation and go through some of my, you know, rituals and routines, I have, you know, I can be clearer in my decision making and I can, you know, be in that flow and get some things done. But it's just been all over the map, I have to say.
Have you felt too much and too little, or have you calibrated in one way or the other?
I think I've been working a lot on recognizing it so then it helps me get back into the just right, I think, right? I think that has taken several years to kind of get to. So I can kind of recognize, you know, if I'm getting a little bit agitated or if I'm getting, you know, in not a good place or in that too little, too much place. So it's something I worked on for a long time because I was always one of those run up here all the time, you know, high energy, too much energy, and, you know, the highs and the lows. And I know you're going to talk a little bit about that later, probably. I'm curious, you know, Nicole, if you don't mind sharing, because, you know, as just graduating, you know, and not necessarily having been working in the workplace full time yet, you know, how are you feeling about, you know, when you think about this too little, too much, or just right? Do you mind sharing or?
Yeah, I feel like it really depends on the day for me. I think at first, as soon as COVID started happening, I think I found a good balance of just being just right, getting everything done. I was really excited to have lots of free time to do it. But now I've been noticing with more and more free time, I sometimes do catch myself doing too little or too much. But it's nice because before, when I would be way overstressed about school or work or something else, I wouldn't really notice. But now that I have so much free time, it's really, you really notice when you're just like at the same desk every day and you catch yourself. But yeah, I think this is a really interesting time. I think that this topic is really interesting, especially for COVID. And yeah, I'm just taking it day by day, I think, for me.
Thanks.
What's interesting for me is that I have experienced both, right? In one sense, I have a lot of things going on. I've got 3 small kids at home, a husband who's, needs to go to work still, and I still have a business to run. And so there's many moments when I feel too much, right? I'm in the too much, and I can see a lot of that, right? Poor impulse control, a difficulty to make the simplest decisions. I'm like, why is this so hard for me right now? But what's been really interesting for me is that I've also experienced too little in the midst of too much, which is too little of the stuff that really nourish me sometimes, right? Too little stimulation in the sense of I'm used to working a full day, and now I'm working half days because I need to do all this other stuff that when the kids are typically at home, at school, and we don't have to be cooking and cleaning behind them and all that kind of thing, right? So in a sense, there's been too much of some stuff and too little of others. And the impact for me is the same. It's a lot of the stuff that we see from the research are the consequences of being in the too much or the too little. Anyone else want to share their experience and what they're noticing as we look at life through this lens of too much and too little and just right? Anybody in just right?
Hi, it's Hilda. I think
Hilda.
it's what you're saying. It's not stasis, right? Sometimes it's too much, sometimes it's too little, sometimes it's just right. And I remember in the early days of COVID, I made sure that I tried to stay in the just right zone, right? Very conscious of it every day. Do something positive, stay positive. Don't listen to news that is really opinionated in a very negative tone, because that can just drain you down. And I find now that 10 weeks later, I'm not even thinking about gotta do something positive every day, right? Because you're just trying to cope and manage. I started doing these bi-weekly webinars, which when you think about it, it's like putting out 2 papers every week, because the government kept changing all of the legislation. So I had to keep abreast. So every day was research, create slides, share that with your participants. And now we're down to 1. And so focusing. What I found is like I tolerate a high level of stress. And my husband and I had a company for 13 years. So that we just coped, and we learned how to cope, and we're good that way. So now I have my own company. But what I find is that good, I'm staying here. I think there's a zone, that you want to be in, but sometimes it goes up and down. And my impulse was tested, and I found myself saying, okay, chocolate, which I normally never eat, was really good. I found the best chocolate bar for us. And so I buy 4 or 5 for the whole family every week. But I find that some days I could eat the like 3/4 of the bar before I know it. And so now what's happening is, though, that I think, okay, that's right. I had a bad day or a stressful day. I deserve a little. But when you find out that, geez, I've had a busy day, I deserve a little chocolate, a little potato chip, a little pie. You're thinking, tomorrow you only are allowed 1 treat for yourself. And then some days I go, why did you eat those 4 different treats again, Hilda? So maybe that's my way of coping. But
Yeah.
I've got the COVID-15. Well, I haven't done the 15 yet, but I'm really worried about being a COVID-15 survivor after all of this.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Two wonderful things that you're bringing to light. Number one is we each have a different level of just right. It's not like a set amount of, we all have the same set. We're all at a different, some people just right is overstimulation or understimulation for others. So part of what we do in this respect is start to become aware of what is just right for us. What does it feel like? And how can we start to bring awareness to when we're in too much or too little, right? So that's number one. We each have a different set. It's part of our job to figure out what that looks and feels like for us personally. Number two is that what I like to tell my clients all the time is it's not your fault, it's your brain's fault. So the reason why I say that is because sometimes we make ourselves wrong for doing something, right? We've had this lapse in, now I'd say a lapse in our prefrontal cortex. It's kind of gotten a little bit less loud than the rest of our brain. And we make ourselves wrong about it. And it's not that it's wrong, it's just that the chemistry in our brain right now is not optimal. So let's look at how we bring the chemicals back into balance so that we can have the capacity to access all of the things that this part of our brain does. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Very helpful.
Anything else in terms of too much, too little, just right? The Goldilocks of the brain? You'll never listen to the Goldilocks story again and not think about your brain.
Well, yeah, I love how that is. That makes sense. Yeah.
I didn't coin it. It's the researcher Amy Arnstein who coined that phrase.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
I just wanted to add, can you guys hear me, by the way?
Yes, Sonia.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Sorry. The poor memory for me, I think, has been a thing where, some days I don't remember what day it is. Like I have to actually look at a calendar and then, I have to look at a calendar. I'm like, what day is it? And then I noticed there was a period in the beginning where I wasn't using my car anymore because everything was shut down. And then I used my car and I was like, I actually forgot how to drive. Like I was at a stoplight and I thought I could go. It was the strangest thing. So yeah. So I mean, I've been in both for sure, but I actually have concrete examples for the poor memory thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I've realized that too. Even in my verbal speech, I sometimes have a hard time finding a word or an expression, or I'm like, something I've quoted a million times, I, for some reason, can't recall it in the moment. And it's because it's, we're not in this equilibrium type of stance where things kind of flow a little bit more naturally for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into why that is. Why is it that COVID-19 has been so disruptive from a brain perspective? But let's go to the next slide, Helen. And talk a little bit about what is actually happening. Like, what are some of the things that are happening that I've seen happening with my clients, with myself, and that we need to, and then we'll get into what it is that makes this so difficult for the brain. But some of the things that I've been seeing in my clients, in myself, is this kind of emotional overwhelm or stress. And it's because there's so much going on, and it's because sometimes we have a lot of time and space for worry. So some of us have no time, and so we're friggin' exhausted all the time, right? Because there's so much going on. And then when we've got moments of time, and there's what ends up happening is we start activating a part of our brain called the default mode network. And this part of our brain, it's a system of neurons. It activates whenever you're not focused on an activity. So when you're focused on some kind of activity, you're in the task positive network. The minute you go into not focusing on that, you're in default mode network. And the over calibration of that is rumination. And this is when we start worrying. This is when we start watching, news incessantly, right? Because we're in our thoughts, where it's just going, 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 going. And so whether we're in too much and we've got all of these things going on and have no time to rest and quiet our brain, or we have too much and we're in rumination because we've over-calibrated, emotional overwhelm and stress is a consequence of that. The other thing is, this is an unfixable problem for most of us, right? We have it, we want to, especially when this first started, we were all in kind of in change theory, they call it the chaos phase. And it's that phase where we're just looking for safety. We're just looking for, are we going to be safe? Are my people going to be safe? How do I survive this, right? And there's no ability to, there's certain elements of control, but in the same way that we used to fix things and were valued for it, were compensated for it, it's been a much more difficult thing to accomplish during this. So much has been out of our control. As humans, we also regulate our nervous system through human interaction. And the restrictions of human interaction have not allowed us to do that to the same extent. We've not been able to see someone personally and kind of feel their calm, have that kind of social regulation of our nervous system happen. And so that has taken its toll. At the beginning of this, we were also running on adrenaline. Adrenaline is the chemical of fear. It's once we're in a fear mode, it's what courses through our veins. And that's why so many people actually saw an increase in productivity at the beginning of this in terms of work, because we were all trying to figure out, how are we going to work virtually? How are we going to set ourselves up so that we can continue to do what we do? Or how are we going to pivot this business? And because all of it was based, in large part by fear, the adrenaline fueled that fear, but it also fuels stress and overwhelm. I love this analogy of opened apps, and a mentor of mine shared this with me because it's so interesting, right? When you have a lot of apps open on your phone, it drains much more quickly. And right now, we have a lot of apps opened on our mental, dashboard. And so we're feeling so much more exhaustion. We're feeling more run down potentially. And then there's just, organizations are looking to reorganize, reorgs are in play, cost-cutting efforts are in play. And so all of this is kind of happening all at once to us. And, just saying this, I'm feeling like the stress increasing in my own body, but we've never experienced anything like this to the extent of this all happening, from one day to the other. It almost felt like overnight. And so, of course, our nervous systems are on overdrive and our brains are having a hard time with handling all of this. And so, Helen, if you go to the next one, actually, before you go there, Helen, what else are you guys noticing? I mean, these are some of the things that I've been noticing, but what else are you noticing in terms of what's happening right now, either with yourself or with those around you?
Sorry, Nicole. Zoom fatigue.
Yeah,
is one that it's such a drainer. I didn't realize it until I've been on a lot of Zooms. And then I think the other thing too is, with what I've seen with people around me is there's like a stage of denial, and then there's like anger, and then there's like liberation, and then they go we keep going in and out of these different stages of how we feel about what's happening. And it's very heavily influenced by what's being put out there in the media and the news and social media, all of that stuff. So it's very confusing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that I definitely feel the adrenaline. I think at the beginning of all of this, I was trying to take as much advantage of all this free time as possible, not knowing how long it would last. I think the more we're going on, the more drained I am feeling. And I'm really happy you brought up the Zoom fatigue, because that is definitely real. And I never, at the beginning of this, I didn't experience anything like that. But the more I do it, the more I'm like, social interaction these days is just really tiring me out. If it's Zoom or any kind of Skype or anything like that, it's weird.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, Nicole, because what I have been noticing originally was a lot of adrenaline fueling kind of action. And now what I'm noticing is much more what you're saying, just the exhaustion, right? And this is kind of the second phase of change theory, which is you've come to acceptance, we've settled into some kind of norm, and the adrenaline is decreasing, which is good in one sense. But what it comes, because we still don't know when things are going to change and the rest of it, what comes in are strong, like those lower energy emotions, like sadness, frustration. There's a lot of research that shows that this is where depression might start sinking in for some people, because we're now kind of on the tail end. We've gone through the adrenaline, and now we're feeling the effects of the adrenaline being gone, and we're still in this kind of thing, right? And so what it tends to be important in this space is to really be kind and self-compassionate with ourselves, to really look at making sure that we're taking care and nourishing ourselves as best as possible, and picking the one or two things that we want to prioritize and letting go of the rest, right? And really prioritizing on those. Hilda, did I interrupt you?
No, I was eating, actually. That's why I turned
Okay.
my thing back off. But I do want to say something, is that, I totally agree with that. And I liken it to like Christmas. You build up to Christmas Day, and you're all like, your adrenaline is going, and the next day there's nothing left, right? You cannot do anything. You just sit like a blob. Not that that's the extreme, but I get that. I loved how you explained that, the adrenaline. And what I found happening was so busy in the early days and trying to make sure people are okay, but then suddenly realizes I'm starting to feel a little bit more, relaxed and kind of thinking, oh, I don't know if I can do this, right? I suddenly thinking, well, if I'm feeling this way, imagine what my kids are doing. So I must have got a second adrenaline rush or something. So I mustered up that ability to have one-on-one conversations with each of them, because they're each different personalities. And in talking to them, realizing this one's really worried from a safety perspective. This one who is, he's got Asperger's, so he's very routine. And to find that COVID disrupts routine, work was disrupting routine, and his stress level went up. So trying to bring him back to something that was more in balance with his norm. And I would use that scale on a scale of 1 to 10. How do you feel? And somebody said, well, during the early days, I was 7 because I was worried about getting COVID, right? And now I feel about a 4 or 5. I said, pre-COVID, what would you feel? Oh, 3. I thought, really? You walked around feeling a 3? That's pretty cool. So each child figuring out what they need, supporting them through that. But it is draining trying to, as you say, Lisa, manage a job, think about supporting your family, cooking meals 7 days, 6 days a week for 5 people. It's, I'm looking forward to the day when people just like, we're going out, we don't have a menu. They say it's like being on vacation, which it is, because all of us are eating together, which is so unusual, except when we're on vacation. But I'm thinking, on vacation, I don't have to cook. Right now, I have to cook.
Yeah.
I think that those are all such great points. And I liked what you said about a lot of apps open, or your mentor, because that is we are out of our routines, you know, and I valued space in the home. Tim, my husband, traveled a lot. And I, as much as I, you know, missed him when he wasn't around and all, you know, had to be the one driving the kids and all that. And it's like, now I'm like, I could use, you know, everybody out to be honest. And, you know, just to have a little more breathing. So I think, I mean, this is all really important. And I know we're going to talk about some strategies to kind of help, because I think, you know, when I saw everybody baking bread and cakes and this, and I'm like, how the heck are they doing that? Like, maybe they did that before, I don't know, when they just did a bit more, but I can't even still clean up my basement room that I've been trying to create a little space for me. It still has boxes in there, and I can't get to any of this other stuff. And I don't know if it was just procrastination, and or maybe it's, now I'm understanding, like I was on such, always fired up my entire life on adrenaline, to be honest. But, you know, until I started to be able to do things to help me come down and be able to deal with all of this. And I'm like loving having everybody too, but there are times where, you know, a little bit of more space would be really nice.
Yeah. So let's get into some, well, I have one slide about why this is so difficult for our brains, and then we'll get into, is that time correct? Is it 12:44 already?
Yeah, okay. I know. Don't worry, we can always go a bit over, but we do set it for about an hour. I know, but this is why I love this, because it's more of just having a chat and people being able to, you know, speak their minds too, right? And get it out. So okay. I know, and Sonia, I appreciate you saying the Zoom fatigue, because, you know, I was hesitant to do these series because there were so many webinars and everything happening, but that's why I wanted to do it more of a way to discuss and open some space for that. But yeah, when you're on there all day, you need that break. You need to get away. And, you know, we don't have all that time to get into the science behind, like, trying to focus on, you know, people's faces. It's not the same as being in person. So I appreciate you bringing that up too. But anyway, this is good stuff. So thank you.
And so I'll do this one really quickly, and then we'll get into managing stress. So basically, the reason why this is all of the stuff that we've all just discussed is that our brain does not like things that are unpredictable, novel, uncontrollable, or have any ability to threaten our well-being, be it physical or our ego. And so COVID-19 is all of these things, right? It's unpredictable. It's new. None of us have experienced a global pandemic. It's uncontrollable in a grand sense, right? And it, at its core, was threatening our well-being. It was threatening our survival. And so that our part of the brain who, that is constantly scanning for threats, this is happening all the time, unconscious to us, constantly looking both internally and externally for risks. All of a sudden it's like, holy beep, all these things are happening, right? Like all this, and we're not happy. And so hence adrenaline starts flowing, emotions start, you know, running, heightened emotions start running high. It all makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's get into 5 tools that are to manage stress. So these are ordered in the order of effectiveness based on research. Okay, the one that you'll notice that is not there, which is no surprise to any coach, is suppression. Suppression does not work. While you know, sometimes we cope in terms of suppressing it for the moment, if we don't return to those emotions to process and release them, they still have the same impact on our body and well-being than they would if we just let it be, right? So suppression and being aware of when and where we're suppressing an emotion or stress is a good place to start and start doing some of these tools. So starting with tool number one, which is just simply naming the emotion, right? We start there. This is the place where, and I'll say this, I tend to use these in order with my clients. And I don't tell them that I'm using this necessarily. Many times I offer this as a questionnaire for them to do with themselves. They work really well when you use them in order. And so just starting off by saying, like, how are you feeling? Put some words to what it is that is happening right now internally. The reason why this works is it actually activates your prefrontal cortex. It activates that part of your brain that releases a neurotransmitter that inhibits these kind of chemicals. It's called GABA. And so whenever you're using your prefrontal cortex, it's almost like Pepto-Bismol for your brain, right? Just kind of calms things down, okay? And so the secret here is not to dwell on the story. It's not to get wrapped up in 20 minutes of why this is horrible, even though we've just spent 40 minutes talking about it to a certain extent. The idea is that we need to clear, we need to express it, and then we just say, listen, what's here is frustration, what here is anger, what's here is sadness, and all of them, or what's here is opportunity, what's here is simple joys. It could be anything, but really being able to name the emotion with a word helps us to start releasing some of that GABA that starts to calm down our brains and our nervous system. Where we go from there is, what can we control in this particular environment, right? What is it that we have a say in? And so for many people, it's what I do during the day, right? How I wake up in the morning, watching or not watching news, how I'm gonna, I think in certain respects, this whole kind of craze around going to get toilet paper was around our brain grasping for something to control. At least I control how much toilet paper I have in my house, right? For whatever reason. But it's those little moments of control and looking to where we actually have a level of control that starts again to help calm us down. Number three is looking at what's truly important. Like, what is it that is truly important during this time for you personally, right? For me, I know that I am not looking to grow my business exponentially during this time. It's just not my first priority right now, right? Right now, my purpose is to promote well-being for me, my family, and in whatever way I can in the community. Having said that, for some people, it has been to grow their business, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's, it's just, what is it that's important for us in this instance, right? What is it that's calling us? What would make us be really living according to how we want to show up and the purpose we want to have in this world, right? Neuroscientists tend to say that if there was only one talent that every human being could have that would change their life, would be the ability to reframe. Just the ability to take on a different perspective. The note here is making sure that it's not, again, what my mentor calls a spiritual bypass, which is that person who says, oh, all is well, I'm really grateful, but really they don't feel it deep in their heart just yet, right? They're really trying to get there, but it hasn't been something that they've fully taken on, which is why I like to keep that reframing later on in the discussion, right? When you've started with naming the emotion and then what can we control and what's important for me in this instance, you're kind of in a space where you can start thinking and appreciating some of the different perspectives that are also true of this time. And then if there's one tool that works all the time, well, that is most effective in terms of managing stress, based on science, it's mindfulness and presence. And as Eckhart Tolle says, there's nothing wrong in this moment, right? Like, what is it that's wrong in this very moment? We tend to get into more stressful feelings when we're living either in the future or in the past. If we're here in this moment here, we can appreciate that everything is fine, right? Everything's okay in this moment. So I've gone through them quickly, but what do you guys think about these tools, and where do you have you used them? Where have they helped? How are you finding managing stress?
I definitely think that all of these are really important. I definitely have found myself using number 2 with the controlling thing. I think that because of all the things that were happening with COVID, I've thrown myself back into doing long distance running, which I was really passionate about before COVID, but now have lots of time to do. So I think instead of being able to control my situation, which I can't at the moment, I'm controlling, hey, how about I do this amount of like kilometers today? So I find that that's definitely very useful for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting too, Nicole, because I don't know if you picked it up on the statistics on the slides. The second one from 20 years ago, one of the number 1 things was exercise to relieve stress, right? I think, although, that's a whole different story about excessive, things. But yeah, that used to be, I was a big runner too. And that used to be really my meditation in a way. And my stress relief was to have that time to just be out in nature. I'm not a fast runner, but just loved being out there and relieving that. And now I do it different ways, but thanks for sharing. I find, mindfulness, trying to be here is something I've been working on a lot, to be here. I just finished Eckhart Tolle's, one of his books. I'm reading Byron Katie right now.
Yep.
Yeah, but I just, I think for me, I've been coming back a lot to the values and purpose. Doing a lot on that lately and kind of revisiting again, what, with all this hitting, what is important. And it's going to be different for everybody, but then I can make those better decisions. That's something I can control, is my decision making, how I react. So that, coming back to values and purpose is something I've been working on quite a bit in the last several weeks, actually. Yeah.
It's interesting because these tools, these different ways of asking ourselves questions, or asking those that we're working with these questions, it's all stuff that coaches do, right? Like Sonia, it's just, this is very typical of how we interact with our clients. And what's beautiful about that is that, it's one of those things where these are all muscles that we can develop, right? What we know about the brain is that it changes with effort and time, right? Whatever we do grows, because that's how our brain works. It's all neural associations, and the more you use it, the more it strengthens. And so the ability to just name, how am I feeling in this moment? How many times do we ask each other, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm good. Good and fine is not an answer to that question, right? It's a societal answer for sure, but in a way that it manages stress, it's around, I'm feeling, and then it's a word of emotion, right? It's naming it so that we can accept it, stop to observe it, be with it for a sec, right? The physical sensation of it. And then all of this is really looking at calming the brain, right? Just bringing our limbic system into check a bit so that it's a little quieter, and allowing that part of our brain that's responsible for resiliency and calm and groundedness to kind of become a little louder. Oh, you're on mute, Helen.
I've been, just because I didn't know if the noise was on mute. Unmute. There we go. I was just curious because I know Marcella's on, and I met Marcella. She's a business owner as well, and she actually has magic hands. So I've actually, met her. She's a massage therapist as well as and much more of a healer. And she leads meditation circles as well, and does also teaches some healing. And so, I always find this, like, between the brain and your whole body and your heart, and just feeling, is it the brain that, and I was a thinker for so long, like, to get out of that, and to feel more, it took a long time, right? So, and I know, Marcella, I know that you work with a lot of energies and things, and I just wondered if you thought, had any thoughts on, how this, how it's impacted you, because you are a healer and you are someone that, and same thing with coaching, when you're helping others, and Hilda on the line with HR professionals, we're always trying to help others, and, then it, how are you impacted as well, right? Did you have any other comments or thoughts, Marcella? I just been a bit quiet.
I'm not as good with words as all of you.
Oh,
I work with the subconscious level of the feelings and thoughts, and it's so encouraging and great to hear you all, to give a proper name to everything that's happening, and to see how you digest everything that's around us right now. Business is still closed, and our patients are stressed to the point where their bodies are in one big knot. I never had so many patients contacting me and asking me for help as right now. So everything what we feel in our brains, in our hearts, is presenting in the body. So every tightness, every extra tension you have in your body is just really the result of your emotion or thought process that just got stuck. You cannot remove it in that moment, and you have to quickly store it because you have to go on in life. So you physically store it, that the emotion or a thought materializes in your tissue and it becomes a knot or a tension or a tightness, and your body starts to automatically move in a compensation manner. So if one muscle group is out, or a muscle in a muscle group is out, then the other muscle group gets overwhelmed, and we start to use our bodies in a very very weird way, and it's not serving as good as it used to. So if you guys can exercise, do yoga, or do any help to your body to keep it nice and at ease, that would probably help you to remove that extra tension as well. And meditation, I find the words from different place. That's why I love to love to watch your workshops, because on a conscious level, for me, it's very hard to find the words. So it's very, very great. Thank you, Helen, and thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. But I just think it's so interesting. It's so related, right? And how that mind and stress and not managing it can then impact physical. Like, it's fascinating to me. So that's why I love this. I have learned so much, even just having guests on here over the last couple months, and there's so many people that have so much to give, and this is what I try to do with these sessions is, some of my knowledge, but there's a lot of other experts out there and a lot of people that have a lot of wisdom to share. So that's what, I may as well say that now because I forgot to at the beginning, but when I started Life Works Well, and this is the Life Works Well Wisdom Series, and mentoring's related to that, but it was because for me, work is part of life. And you need the wellness piece for both. So life works well, it all goes together, right? And how you integrate it and how you manage it. There's so much in there, but, and that was one of the reasons, trying to, what I would love to see is have, and Lisa, you do this work, and others like coaches. There are so many people that can share with leaders in how to help their organizations and then help their employees. The more that we can have teachers and people helping, it's just going to create a much better workplace, but also a better world in our communities and how we can help each other, right? So yeah, definitely this has been a challenging time. I think it does help with trying to reflect on what's important, and hopefully we'll see some shift. I know we're a little bit over, but I thought if anybody had any further questions for Lisa or comments before we wrap up, I am going to continue the series, probably like Hilda. I'm going to slow down. I think I'm going to do 2 a month because I have lots of other things I need to do, but I have loved it. So I don't want to contribute to all the Zoom fatigue and noise out there either, but I just hope that you were able to at least learn something. And I really wanted to thank Lisa for sharing, and so glad. So Hilda, did you want to have a question or, oh, you have to go. Okay, we'll see you soon. Thanks for coming. Any last final thoughts or questions for Lisa before we wrap up? I know I see Noah on there, but may have been not wanting to come out, and that's okay too. So any last thoughts or?
I'll say one thing about, if I may, just about mindfulness, because sometimes it gets, or often it gets bucketed in with meditation. Mm-hmm. And certainly meditation is a type of mindfulness. It's not the only way. Meditation doesn't work for everyone. I meditate, but I know people that, many clients of mine don't meditate. They've tried, they don't enjoy it. Mindfulness is just bringing yourself to the present moment periodically throughout the day, right? Just the impact and the power of being able to take 5 deep breaths before you go onto a Zoom call, before you walk into some kind of scenario, is hugely beneficial. Right? The ability to just be present to whatever rumblings are going on rather than going to the next thing, just taking a moment at the beginning of something and at the end of something to just be present for a few seconds. That's all it takes. It doesn't, if it's a meditation practice, wonderful, beautiful. I mean, great research around the impact of that. And it's not an all or nothing. There are other things that you can do to bring yourself into that mindfulness presence without a full-blown meditation practice. Oh, you're on mute, Helen.
I think I've got it backwards today. See that memory lapse. Sorry. I actually have had 2 days of retreat. Like I'm in my 2nd day. This was supposed to be a break, and it's been 9 to 3 o'clock on Zoom. So yeah, I think I might need to take a little bit of a break before I hop back onto that today. But yeah, I can't do it. I'm much better in like person, but I'm glad you made that distinction, because as I mentioned earlier, like for me, I thought, I often just would take, even before getting on today, still I could feel sometimes my adrenaline gets up there, and I just take a few breaths, not worry, or if I've had a draining conversation, I need to go away and just take a few breaths, but also, being here. And even some of the Zoom chats, like there's always the chat going on, and I'm like, okay, I don't even want to look at that anymore, because it's not it's taking away from me listening to a person. But anyway, I really appreciate you coming on and everyone joining today. All of the sessions that I've done are recorded and they're on my website, lifeworkswell.ca. And I will share this presentation with and the recording with people that joined today, and you can spread the word. And so I will also, if you're interested, you can join future ones, provide some feedback on other topics. But I really think that it's important right now for us to, do what we can to help each other. I think we still have a long road ahead of us, but if we can find a little bit of some calming space or a little bit of time to learn something new and really do what's best for us, I guess. I think that's important. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And once again, thank you. And Lisa, your website information is in the presentation as well. LisaDeRocha.com or .ca, sorry.
Lisa.com.
Yeah. And I always say DeRocha, and I should know that because
Most people do. It's okay.
I really feel a little tired right now, actually. So, and you know me, I'm usually high energy, but it's probably good for me to come down a little. But anyway, I just wanted to say thanks again, and everyone have a wonderful day. And I hope to see you on another session in the future.
Thanks.
So yeah, take care, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.